For the first time in 6 years of Buhari government, Nigerian GDP growth hit over 5% for a second quarter, latest figures released today. And the PDP leadership today resolves that Elder Yemi Akinwumi is the acting chairman of the PDP pending the determination of the case in court, barring Uche Secondus from parading himself as the party's national chairman. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Shiwa Kimaloye in Lagos. Before we delve into the state of the Nigerian economy and how the Buhari government is handling it, and the stories of the latest figures that have come out from the NBS today regarding the GDP growth, let's tell you about the situation in the People's Democratic Party, PDP. The leadership of the party is making frantic efforts to save the party from the recent crisis owing to a court order from Port Harcourt restraining Prince Uche Secondus from parading himself as the national chairman of the party. The meeting of the party's National Working Committee and that of the Board of Trustees in Abuja accepts the Deputy National Chairman, South, Elder Yemi Akinwumi, as acting national chairman of the party, pending the resolution of the court case that restrained Secondus from being the party's national chairman. After that meeting, a member of the NWC and a member of the BOT both spoke about the situation of things in the PDP.
We have no faction in the People's Democratic Party. A motion was moved, and Elder Yemi Akinwumi was unanimously approved as the acting chairman of our great party. And it's interesting for me, or for you to know, and through you Nigerians should know, that this is in line with the provisions of our constitution. The party is fully back on stream. We are sailing properly, and I will also let you know that, as you can witness, our Board of Trustee meeting is going on as we speak. Tomorrow we are going to have a caucus meeting, as well as the National Working Committee will also meet tomorrow, preparatory for the National Executive Committee meeting, NEC meeting, which will hold on Saturday.
You have an internal crisis in your house, in your department, in your village, in everywhere. It's normal. But what makes you different is your ability to resolve that crisis. And we have proved to Nigerians that we have that ability to resolve our internal crisis. And therefore, the crisis or crises, I don't know what is the plural of crisis, I mean, that is facing this country, from banditry to kidnapping, you know, name it, for God's sake. We have that capacity to resolve all those crises.
Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar there, and also the PDP National Publicity Secretary Kola Ologbodiyan. Before we get into our conversation tonight, everyone, let's tell you that there's been a major defection from the People's Democratic Party to the APC. The senator representing Anambra North in the National Assembly, Senator Stella Odua, a former minister, has dumped the PDP for the APC. Stella Odua was received into the APC fold at a very brief ceremony in Abuja by the Memala Buni-led APC Caretaker Committee, where the Deputy Senate President and some governors of the APC were also present. Tonight, our attention is on the economy and the handling of the Buhari-led federal government in dealing with the fragility and the very complicated situations of the Nigerian economy. There is good news, however. Nigeria's gross domestic product, GDP, grew by 5.01% year-on-year in real terms in the second quarter of 2021. And that's according to the National Bureau of Statistics' latest report published today. The report shows 3 consecutive quarters of growth following the negative growth rate recorded in the second and third quarters of 2020. This report, experts say, is some good news and a signpost of an incremental recovery in the economy. It is also described as a gradual normalization of economic and business activities in the country. Because if you look at it in comparison to the quarter 2 2021 figures, side by side with the 6.3% in the Q2 of 2020, it's the worst contraction the economy has suffered in recent history. Well, we give you a clear picture of what this government under the Buhari administration should throw a small house party for. Although it was due largely to the period the economy was completely shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic, where economic activities were completely crippled. Let's get you to see some of what this means and perhaps some figures that are important for this conversation. For example, let's show you some of the sectors that are responsible for this growth and some of those that have experienced contraction. You see, from the road transportation, which seems to have given the most growth, and electricity to coal mining, trade, water, waste management. And if you look at the flip of this, the contractions are in the oil refining, crude oil and gas, and other financial institutions. Those are some of the areas that have contracted and the percentage of the contraction that you can see there. Let's also show you a snapshot from the NBC and how it has been from 2015, the GDP growth leading up until today, the Q2 of 2021. Let's get talking on this one and let's give you an idea of what this means altogether. What is the GDP? What does this mean? Does it mean more food on the table of an average Nigerian? What does it translate into good governance? And how will these give Nigerians more money in their pockets and food on their table? Let's get to hear from an economist, Mr. Amuda Yusuf. He joins us virtually from Lagos. Thank you so much, Mr. Yusuf, for joining us tonight. Give us a sense of what this means for Nigeria. Good news, I reckon. But can we rejoice and can we now sleep and say the economy is in good hands?
Yes, It's an indication of some positive developments in the economy, because the last quarter we had 0.5% GDP growth, and this is a quantum leap. The quantum is a significant growth. It's a significant difference from what we had in Q1. We are talking about 5.01% growth in GDP. And what this reflects is the fact that the economy is gradually recovering from the shocks of the pandemic. That is what it's pointing to. Secondly, there's also a base effect dimension to it, because the 5% growth is not so much about the fact that there has been any significant change in what we are doing in terms of managing the economy. There's what we call the base effect, because this figure is a year-on-year figure. They are comparing Q2 2021 to Q2 2020. Q2 2020, we had perhaps the worst recession. We had perhaps the worst contraction in recent history. It was a contraction of about 6%. So when you compare what you have now with that kind of very serious contraction, it is very easy to understand why we have this kind of quantum growth in GDP. But having said that, just as you said in your intro, it is very difficult for the man on the streets to relate to this. From a macroeconomic analysis point of view, this is good news. But from a practical point of view, I'm talking of the man on the street now, the common man. I'm talking of those who are investors. This may still not mean much for them. Because what is important for them is how the government is addressing some of the key concerns. Concerns around issues of poverty, concerns around issues of spiraling inflation, the cost of food, the cost of basic items, the growing unemployment, the weakening purchasing power, the issues of security. These are things that matter the most for now. So we need to see how we align these positive developments in GDP numbers to some of these realities that the citizens are facing. That is only when these things can make some sense to the average Nigerian. Otherwise, this is just purely an academic thing.
Well, at some point when some of us think that this is for those of us who are economic illiterates, who are thinking that, oh, this is some good news for us. But from the expert point of view, it sounds academic. But what part of these can give us joy? If you look at some of the indicators of these GDP growth, road transportation, rail, but I mean, our mainstay, oil and gas, there's a contraction in crude oil and gas, oil refining, and other financial institutions. There are contractions in this sector. Does that have an effect on the practicality of the economy at the macro level, just like you explained?
Well, the challenges that the oil and gas sector has been facing is what has manifested in the GDP numbers. The Q2 numbers indicate that we had the worst contraction in the oil and gas. Oil refining, for instance, contracted by about 47%. Crude oil and gas contracted by about 13%. All of this goes to show the challenges that the sector has been facing. Happily, we now have the PIB. We are hoping that this may change the narrative around the sector. Before now, the sector has been grappling with a lot of issues around insecurity, vandalization of pipelines, crude oil theft, and all manner of problems. In addition to that, the sector has also been grappling with challenges of policy. The regulatory environment is very tough. The policy environment, the tax environment, the fiscal terms, there are a whole lot of issues around the sector. So hopefully, the PIB, by the time the implementation begins, the Petroleum Industry Act, I keep calling it the PIB, the act, which has not been signed by the president, we are hoping that will change the narrative. But there is a concern about the refineries. The refineries has consistently been posting losses, and in this GDP number, the refineries is showing a contraction of 47%. And yet, the government is still making a proposal to continue to invest in those refineries, continue to run them, continue to manage them. I think that's, for me, is a major source of worry. But having said that, the GDP numbers generally, I think, is a good pointer that the economy is recovering. But just as I said, you need to make the GDP an inclusive GDP growth. One inclusion means is that the citizens must feel the impact. Because right now, a lot of complaints, especially around inflation, around cost of food. And this is taking a huge toll on the welfare of the citizen. I mean, if you go to the street now and tell an average man who has been complaining about the price of bread, or the price of gari, or the price of yam, and all of that, and even the price of gas. And you go ahead and say, well, there is good news, and the GDP has grown by 5%. What do you think the man will tell you? So we need to relate, we need to connect to the realities. It is good news, it is a good pointer, but we need to make sure that we align all of this, the realities that people are facing in their household, and to the realities that businesses are facing, especially around investment climate, especially around business environment, and so on.
There's one more thing that I'd like you to explain to our viewers tonight. My audience on this program are probably not your business and the economic type. They're the ones who want to listen to the politics side of things, the policy, and how governance is going in the country, which, of course, this is part of it. But if I understand it in the basic and in the layman language, the GDP is the extent of productivity that comes out of the economy. Is it? Am I right?
Well, the GDP is an estimation of the value of the total output, the total economic activities in the economy.
Great.
So when we are recording a GDP growth of 5%, it means that the activities in the economy, the outputs in the economy has grown by 5.01% between Q2 of 2020 and Q2 of 2021. Because these figures are year on year.
Okay.
So that is why I was talking about the base effect.
Yeah. So for a lot of people who have been thinking about this economy and perhaps in some areas the doubling of the prices of products, and they're wondering whether or not they are in good hands when in terms of the economy under this government. Perhaps I may be able to show the graph to our viewers to see what things are. I opened by saying this is the biggest GDP growth in the 6 years of the Buhari government. So you can see how things are. This is the highest that we have seen the GDP grow in the last 6 years since 2015 of this Buhari administration. It went so bad, like Mr. Yusuf has said, in Q2 of 2020 during the pandemic. But now, if you give us an understanding, if this is the highest that we have seen, does it look like something is being done under this government that is perhaps different, that should give us good news that can sustain the growth of the economy? And invariably, maybe Nigerians need to be patient a bit and they will start seeing it. Can you give us a sense of whether or not we're in good hands under the Buhari government?
Well, what I can say is that we are beginning to see some positive developments in the economy with these results. Because what this is showing is that economic activities are beginning to pick up. Some sectors that were under lockdown are now a bit more active. Generally, things are also looking positive, especially around things like oil price, and of course, in some areas of policy. But we need to do a lot more than what we are seeing, because we still have quite a lot that is of concern to both the citizens and investors. We need to do a lot more in the area of the right kind of policies, fiscal policies, our trade policy, our monetary policy, our foreign exchange policy. We need to do a lot more in the area of even general investment environment, investment climate, our institutions, our port environment, our tax environment, our regulatory environment. These are issues that businesses still complain a lot about issue of access to foreign exchange, about the depreciation in the currency. These are big issues. But the point is that this is a positive development. We must acknowledge that. 5% GDP growth is a positive development, but just as I said, there's a very strong base effect in this number. But nonetheless, it is positive, but there's still a whole lot that we need to do. Because otherwise, the man on the street will find it difficult to relate to what we are talking about, that the economy is doing well, and yet the price of bread has doubled in the last 1 year. The price of gari has doubled. The price of yam has doubled. So many things have doubled. These are the real things that impact on the welfare. So while we acknowledge this positive macroeconomic development, we need to do a lot more on the welfare issues. We need to do a lot more on the investment climate issues. That is the way we can make this growth inclusive. That is the way we can make the citizens appreciate a lot more what these figures mean.
So one area that I know that this government has talked about is that we have the issue of productivity or the issue of revenue problem. And when people ask the question of debt burden, they say, look, it's still within range. Does this have any relation to the GDP growth? Is there anything that we need to worry about in terms of our borrowings and what we are producing or how much money Nigeria makes?
Well, what we need to worry about first is the amount of resources we are currently using to service debt. Yes, there are a lot of metrics through which you measure the sustainability of debt. You have the debt to GDP ratio. If you use that ratio, of course, we are in some good standing. But the reality is that you don't use GDP to service debt. You use revenue to service debt. And we have a major revenue problem. The last numbers that we got from the finance minister indicated that, as at the report that was given as at May this year, the actual revenue, the ratio of debt service to actual revenue was over 90%. That is not a healthy financial position. So we need to do a lot more in that area. And the way to do it is to ensure that we grow the economy better, we create a better environment, because if the GDP is improving, as we are beginning to see, if investment level is improving, revenue will also increase. And when we are talking about issues of revenue, there are two sides to it. Because it's a fiscal management issue. There's the expenditure side, there's also the revenue side. So while we struggle to ensure that we optimize revenue, we should also continue to see how we can manage costs, how we can reduce the cost of governance.
All right.
That is one. Secondly, there are also areas in which we can invite the private sector to be part of the governance process, to be part of investment infrastructure in infrastructure. So if we have a better managed environment, better structure of public-private partnership, there's a lot that the private sector can do, so that we don't have a situation where the government is saddled with everything. We can identify the projects that are bankable that the private sector can pick up, but we need to create the confidence for such investors to be able to come in. And we need to also create an environment that is more predictable, that is not as volatile as what we have. We need a regulatory environment that is also more investment friendly. We need a tax environment that is more investment friendly. That is the way to make the economy grow. Because economic growth is about investment, it's about investors.
All right.
There's a strong correlation between the growth of investment, the growth of employment, the growth of revenue, the stability in the foreign exchange market, and all of that. There's a positive correlation around or among all these metrics. So those are some of the things I think we can do to ensure that we have a fiscally sustainable economy.
Mr. Muda Yusuf, always a pleasure having your expert opinion on some of these issues. Thank you so much indeed on such an occasion where Nigeria has recorded 5.01% in GDP growth, the highest we've seen in the last few years. Thank you so much indeed, Mr. Yusuf, for your time. Let's hear more from other people on this matter. There are two friends who don't agree when it comes to the economy, especially how the Buhari government is handling it. One is of the APC, the other is of the PDP. I'm being joined from our Abuja studio by Dr. Kach Ononuju. He's an economist and a member of the PDP. And virtually, I have joining me also a member of the APC, is a political economist, Ayo Oyalawo. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on. Let me begin with Mr. Kachononuju. Mr. Kachononuju doesn't believe that the economy is being handled properly under the Buhari government. But let me ask you, a lot of experts say this is good news. Have you come to a point that you are happy for a moment for the handling of the economy by the Buhari government?
Well, you understand, the Buhari administration has failed. This attempt to manage news is a new thing we're seeing. You would have to ask the man on the street if things have changed. The story about economic progress is an attempt to divert us from the most important topic today on every Nigerian's problem, and that is the absence of security. The economy hasn't got well. This figure has come, and we ask from the 1% we had in last quarter, how do come we have this jump when the foreign exchange supply to the markets have been low? Is the value and size of foreign exchange that determines economic activity. So that's if they have made policies that had provided foreign exchange to the markets, we would have seen an increase. I don't see where a decrease in supply will bring an increase when the economy itself seems to tank. So because the ABS is an institution that I've come to regard its figures, I want to wait to see the interrogated particulars of this particular report. I have seen it, but what I will ask is the man on the street, how do they feel? And most importantly, the security situation that seems to be very, very precarious.
All right. So that's a good point for us to take a break on the program. But when we come back, I will show you some of the snapshots of what NBC's report looks like today, and perhaps we might be able to interrogate it properly. Tonight on the program, we have some more thoughts on the program. The question is the economy in good hands? And that is what we have up next for you on the program. Under the Buhari government, our economy in good hands? We'll discuss more on the growth of the GDP, the highest we've seen in 6 years. Join us again, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the program. We've been discussing the GDP growth, which NBS, the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics report, shows that is grown by 5.01%. That is huge numbers, considering what we have seen in 2020, for example. Look at how that snapshot and that graph, how it has grown from 2015 up until what we have seen today. There was a very deep that we experienced in Q2 of 2020. Let's flip the page and show you some more on what this means. So the real quarterly GDP growth for Q2, like you see there, is what you've seen, 5.01%. And this is some in volumes. This is what you see and what you get at the moment. So we are interrogating it, what the NBS is giving and released. We showed you earlier the breakdown of the sectors and how this growth has been experienced, the biggest being the road transportation and rail. Let's jump back quickly into the conversation and get my panel to discuss more on this. Dr. Kachononuju is one of my guests tonight, and Ayo Yalawa. Both of them never agree on issues of economy, especially how the government is handling it. Kachononuju is always saying that the government is not doing well. He's of the PDP. Dr. Kachononuju, if we heard what Mr. Yusuf said, that, look, this is good news. In 6 years, we have not seen this kind of thing. But from your own point of view, you think it's not enough. Some experts will say it's work in progress. And is an indicator that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel.
That's what I'm saying. It is good news. But I like to see the interpretations. I would love to interrogate this because of the value I give to the NBS record. I want to see the interpretations of this game. I want to see where the growth came from, because from 1% to 5.01% within a 3-month period, I want to see what provided the stimulus that actually forced these interpretations. And until that comes on, I will keep my reactions to myself. They have said this. I want to see what they say and then compare that to the records we have. Because if a jump in growth does not seem to reflect in the people, then you will understand. You talked about railway. You're giving it to the Chinese. What do they do to the economy to bring stimulus? No, it is Chinese labor. It is Chinese manufacturing. So we may see a jump in spending without a correlation in stimulus action within our own local economy. And it tells you, when politicians make investments, how do they consider that which they do and its effect on the local economy? Because it is this kind of economic activity that should force a stimulus. Because after all, stimulus comes from an aggregation of the behavior of several players in the economy. If the people you're paying money to in transportation do not have any local effect in Nigerian manufacturing, Nigerian services, and its distribution, then this might be numbers you're quoting that have no correlation to the local activity that will force stimuluses that will gain the people. Because after all, growth in economy is the sum total of the aggregation of the local economic activities that occur within your economy. So how do you do this? How do you invest? How do you hire a job and manufacturing productivity that impacts on the local economy? You don't just gain growth due to spending and there is no impact on the local market. There is no gain from aggregation of the sum total of the economic activity. This is where you have to look at. When we were suggesting a infrastructure-driven spending that will stimulate growth, we were thinking about infrastructure in which local industry, local manufacturing, local service provider will actually help to aggregate growth, because it is that local infrastructure-based spending that brings positives in employment, in labor, and that is what you need. But when you pay money only to the Chinese and you tell us transport, Chinese labor, Chinese industry, Chinese goods and services, what do we get? I don't see that as growth. I want growth that impacts upon the Nigerian population.
Let me allow Ayo Yalawa to come into the conversation. Ayo Yalawa is a political economist and a member of the APC. Thank you so much, Mr. Yalawa, for your time tonight. You've heard your very good friend, Dr. Kacho Nanuju, whom you hardly agree with, his own view on the situation of things. I saw you nodding your head in the negative when he was speaking. What are your thoughts on what has developed today?
Good evening, Sean. Thank you for having me. Thank you for bringing a proper economist earlier on to explain to Nigerians what has happened. That is, I think, Dr. Muda Yusuf. That's a serious and a proper economist, not a political hack who will just come and look for excuses and muddle up the waters. As far as I'm concerned, if you don't want to see good, you will not see good. Now, we have had an economy that was completely shut down for several months last year, which resulted into a terrible situation where we were in a recession. And because of our proper management of the economy, astute management of the economy by the economic managers, we came out of the recession faster than any other country, faster than most people gave us room for. Today, you know that the World Bank has said we will grow by maybe between 1 point something to 2% and thereabout, but we have done 5%. That is absolutely fantastic. But of course, somebody who will not see because what you don't want to see, you don't want to see. Now, talking about infrastructure-driven economy, I see him talking about complaining that Chinese, blah, 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 blah. But you see, these people either don't want to hear what is being said or they are just prepared to confuse the situation. The Minister of Transportation has explained to Nigerians several times that we already have Nigerians that are being trained in this train technology. In fact, we are already building what you call the University of Transport, which means we don't want to just build this train. We want to have a system where we can graduate experts in every area of train transportation. So, which means we are not just going to build infrastructure, we're going to have people who can manage it and possibly import it over time to other clients. When do you start this? It is not when you are hungry that you cook. You cook waiting for the time when hunger comes and you eat. So, but this man who just want to complain and make all these excuses, and it's unfortunate. As far as I'm concerned, there must be some basis for you to build on. The basis to build our economy on is the fact that our GDP growth is positive, and from there, foreign investors will make decisions based on what they are saying. Nobody wants to come and invest in an economy that is not doing well, but an economy that is growing. And if you look at it properly, critically, it is not just the oil sector. In fact, the oil sector did not even grow as well as you will wish. There are other sectors that are growing, which means the diversification of the economic plan that this administration embarked on is finally paying off, and we are seeing the fruit of the diversification, which means now the economy can begin to expand and grow into every areas. We don't just look at oil and gas only. We look at telecoms, we look at manufacturing, we look at trade, we look at commerce, so many other areas. So for me, it's a positive growth, and I hope we don't rest on our laurels and our house on this. Every other area should be looked at so that the common man can begin to feel the effect of the growth in the GDP.
Let me ask you, because this is one area, as much as this is good news, but one worry when people complain that they cannot feel the growth of the GDP, the average man on the street, when they say that, how do you respond to that?
If you follow the trend also, the inflation rate has been dropping small by small, not as much as I will wish, but it's dropping. So which means, especially food inflation, we are in the rainy season. Anybody who knows how our agriculture is practiced in Nigeria knows that it's a seasonal thing. As we speak right now, the planting season has been done. In the next few months, weeks, there will be harvest, and gradually food prices will begin to drop. And there is a Yoruba adage that when hunger has left your problem, the remaining can be easily tackled. So hopefully when food inflation begins to drop over I'm sure by next quarter, we'll be able to record something positive in terms of food inflation. When you begin to record that, then the average man can see. But you see, when we keep talking about this average man, common man, the truth is when there is a growth in the economic activity, which means so many other people are tapping into the economy activities that is happening in the country. Rather than just sit down and complain, people are looking inwards. People are tapping into the value chain in the agricultural system. People are tapping into other areas of the economy. So we keep talking about this common man, and yes, truly there is common man, but if the economy does not grow, the common man will not even have any hope in the first place. So with the growth in the economy, everybody begin to look for opportunities. Let us not sit down and think the federal government or the state government will provide job for everybody. We just have to plug in and see the areas where there are needs. Fintech, many young people are making monumental leaps. doing other things. So I think we should encourage people to look at areas where they can tap in rather than help them to look for areas to wail and say, oh, how does it affect me? GDP growth affects everybody because if the economy contracted, nobody will invest in your economy. And if there are no investors, then there will be no business. If there are no business, you can't even start talking of this common man of food. So it is a positive growth that should now translate if everybody begin to tap into the available opportunities that are in the system, in the economy.
One area that is perhaps critical also is security, and how that will also affect either in the negative or positively the economy, and how productivity or the output in the economy, which of course invariably will amount to the figures that we're seeing in the GDP. The question is, the security situation is worrisome. People will be asking.
Sean, let me quickly answer you. I know where you are going. You see, it is very,
You've not heard my question. You've not heard my question, Ayo. So you probably answered.
Okay, go ahead.
So the question I'd like to ask is the effect of security on the Nigerian economy and the hopes of people having peace of mind in running their businesses under the government that promised that security will be fixed in 2015 and was renewed in 2019.
Well, if you have been following the news, which I have, the Nigerian military has recorded a huge gain in terms of the war of attrition that we have been facing in the northeast. In the last couple of weeks, we've had over 3,000 surrenders, which means the ISWAP/Boko Haram are feeling the heat. But you see, because of one breach, the entire Nigerian media went on overdrive, crying and wailing about, oh, security, oh, they've attacked NTA, oh, yes, it was a bad move. But why is nobody talking about all the pluses, all the gains that we have recorded in the last couple of weeks and months, whereby even the fighters of the Boko Haram are laying down their arms and surrendering to Nigerian troops? But you see, one breach, has become the item of news for the past 3 days. It is disgraceful if we want to see only the negative. I am not saying there should be negative, but the truth in life is that you will never have a perfect security system. We will win more and lose some. So why do we concentrate only on the one we have lost and then forget that before this breach, we have had massive wins in the in the north east. It is unfortunate. So as far as I am concerned, the military is doing their job. They are winning more than they are losing. It is painful we lose anybody, but it is a war. We will lose, we will win. But we have been winning. Why is nobody talking about all the wins? So as far as I am concerned, we have a setback, no doubt about it. But that setback is not substantial enough to throw away all that we have gained in the past couple of weeks and months. So please, let's try and be balanced in the reportage of security issue in Nigeria. God bless Nigeria.
I thought you said you have been following the news. If you have really, you would have seen on the day that the military came out with the successes and the list of what they've done. We had a full show talking about the successes of the Nigerian military and how we need to move forward. That we did right here on the program, if you have been following. But, I mean, if we stay on the issue of the economy and how invariably the Nigerian people can benefit or gain, this GDP growth, if you look at the inflation figures, you look at the issue of underdevelopment, underemployment, and the figures on unemployment rate, which had gone into double digits. Inflation is in double digits. The question is, how do we reverse this trend so that some of the gains that we have seen today will be sustained?
Thank you, Sean. A journey of 1,000 kilometers, like they always say, start with a step. When you have a good GDP growth, it is, I'm sure we all know that GDP really is the total monetary or market value of all the services and goods being produced within a country borders within a specific time. So if we are having a growth, it means clearly that economic activities has picked up. Now, what I just said earlier on is that in this climate, that means to do business is much easier now than this same time last year. So if everybody begin to look at where can I tap in, how can my business benefit? Now this is an opportunity. It is much better to invest in a growing economy than a stagnant or a recessed economy. So everybody should begin to look at areas they can do. Look, let's not sit down and begin to say, oh, job losses. Most times, even the way we calculate our unemployment figure in Nigeria is funny. They said we said 20 hours or 30 hours means anything less than 20 hours is unemployed. But we always forget that so many people who do there are some jobs that you do. You are, if for instance, a consultant, you don't even have register. You could sit down in your house and finish all your job, but they will still put that as unemployed. I mean, I will have engaged the NBS to look at how to fine-tune these figures so that it will capture our reality of unemployment.
All right.
I disagree with the figure based on some of the parameters that are being used. But be that as it may, it's a good news that can translate into every area of our economy if everybody sits up and look at areas they can benefit and tap in. The economy is growing. The CBN has made it easier now in terms of if you have legitimate business to get foreign exchange. If you have legitimate business to transact, you can go to any of your bank.
Ayo, just for a moment, so that we can wrap up. Let me bring back Dr. Kacha Ononuju. On a final note, Dr. Ononuju, if you can tell us, because at the end of the day, this is not about PDP or APC any longer. It's about the average Nigerian on the street there and the food on their tables. What do we need going forward to consolidate on the good news of this GDP growth?
The GDP growth figures are produced under the period of a brand new Statistician General of the country. Yemi Kale's tenure ended on the 16th of August. I repeat, the current figures are produced under a brand new Statistician General of the country appointed recently by President Buhari. The man who built the name for the institution, Yemi Kale, his tenure ended on the 16th of August. That's why I told you I want to wait to interrogate the characters of this position. If there was small provision of foreign exchange and our economy being an import-dependent one, how would you have so much with no local impact? If it has to do with transportation, as I said, I repeat what I said, despite the gentleman's stories. I want to see the thing impact Nigerians. If our politicians did not design it that way, they should design economic activities that impact the local people. That's how you get positive economic growth.
All right. Ayo Yalo, let me allow you to have the last say here. What's your final word on this? Going forward, how do we consolidate on this?
Well, I will say to Nigerians that, like I said earlier on, a journey of 1,000 kilometers starts with a step. The GDP growth has shown that we are on the right track. And I will advise everyone who is a businessman, people who have businesses. These are opportunities. I mean, there are opportunities available. And that means the climate is right to invest, to do business. So people should plug in and not look at unnecessary negativity that are plaguing us. If you hear the news, you will think we are all at war, but it is not that bad. I just came in from somewhere in Abuja here. I can still move around. So businesses can run, and the positivity is such that the momentum is there for everyone to tap in and see how they can better their lives and their businesses. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Ayo Oyalo, political economist and a member of the APC. Dr. Kach Ononuju, a member of the PDP and an economist. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time tonight. You probably will be still talking about the GDP growth and what this means for Nigeria. But on that note, we end the show for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'm Sean Wakimale. Bye for now.